Yo, this is Kool, the original Starchild. There was no culture yet. There was nothing called hip hop yet. It was just that I grew up in the Bronx and I went to a music high school, which was Music and Art High School. The high school they made the movie Fame from. I went there with Curtis Blow and a bunch of other musicians. And it's just that at that time, there was music going on. There was graffiti going on. I'm an original graffiti writer, New York City, first generation. You know, you would write your name, and you would go to parties and maybe tag outside or the building or whatever. And it wasn't like it was planned. We all did it. It was just something in the air that everybody like wanted to go to a party on the weekend. Friday and Saturday nights, you had to party somewhere. And basically because parties were cheap back in those days, I mean, you know, this is the Bronx we're talking about in the 70s. There wasn't a lot of money running around. You weren't going downtown. And wherever a DJ was playing at, you made sure you was there. And, you know, before you even went there, you planned to dance and you planned to break on some girls. Y'all call it break dance. And what we did, we had dance routines and we would plan this. We'd practice during the week. And so we look forward to that, you know what I'm saying? And just go to parties and have fun. It became a cultural icon. It became hip hop. But back then it wasn't even called hip hop. It was about Kool playing somewhere, maybe P.T.J. Jones playing somewhere, maybe Starsky playing somewhere, and we would make sure that we were there. And once we got there, we did our thing. And the thing consisted of just dancing, listening to the music, getting the beats, and just inducing that feeling into you because it was something that we needed. You can't put a label on that. It was an expression that just had to happen. And we felt that, so we was doing it. And we all did it. The first party I went to where I heard a DJ and an MC, but really was a DJ, was Starsky playing by himself. And he played at a Burger King on Prospect Avenue in the South Bronx. It was a Burger King. And they got rid of the tables, cash registers off the counter. There was 2 turntables and Starsky DJing. And I went there and saw that and it just bugged me out. I couldn't believe it. The place was packed and he did his thing and the crowd was responding. It was really hot. That was my first experience close up with a DJ talking on the mic and yet playing and rocking the crowd. My next experience, which really turned me on to being a DJ/MC, then becoming an MC, was I used to go with a girl whose best friend was DJ Hollywood's girlfriend. And my girl heard me rhyming one day in my house, and she said, she asked me, was I really into that? I said, yeah, I want to become a DJ and an MC. This is back in '76. She said her best friend was Hollywood's girlfriend. She got on the phone and called her right then and there and put Hollywood on the phone and asked him, could we come to Club 371 that weekend because that's the club he played at. And so she said, yo, we come in there, I want you to hear my man. I thought she was bullshitting. She wasn't bullshitting. We got there, got in for free. When I walked through the door, he was doing his thing, and he was rhyming and DJing, and the crowd was just mesmerized. He had routines where the crowd answered back, and anything he did or told the crowd to do, they did. It was the most electric atmosphere I've ever felt. What blew my mind was, as I came to the booth, my girl brought me to the booth, he stopped the music. This is in the middle of Hollywood's essence around 1977. He was the king at that time. He really was. And he announced my name to the crowd and told them I was getting on the mic. He told Junebug, who was his DJ, when he didn't actually cut, to put something on for me. Junebug, God bless his dead. Junebug put something on, and he just handed me the mic. I was put in the spot. I had to rock it. And I took care of business, and I rocked it, and that was the beginning, and I continued on ever since. That was in 1977. So it was Starsky really in Hollywood. Hollywood really turned me on to just what it meant to captivate people and get the crowd going and have people responding to what you were saying and just going crazy. And I loved it. A friend of mine and myself started building a system. His brother was in a pioneering DJ group in the Bronx called the Together Brothers. They were his older brother. And because of them, they taught us how to build speakers, and we built speakers. And we bought a Crown amp, and back in those days, you had to have your own system. The Crown amp at that time was like the state-of-the-art amp. It was an excellent amplifier. You had to have that because you had a system. You would take your system and go to the park and play. This is before records. This is before we could even go into clubs because really, if you were going into a club, you had to dress up. You had to wear shoes. You had to be, and we were like that, but yet we wanted to just party and have fun. So we basically hit the parks. At any given time, Flash might be playing in a park. The Cold Crush, before they were even called that, were playing in a park. Uptown in the Bronx was Together Brothers, and it was the Come Off Crew. And myself and my man Neil, we were called Creation Disco Fantasy. And we would set our speakers up, take the power cord and plug it into the amp, plug it into the light pole, and hope we didn't blow the system, because the amp's from a light pole, But who was an electric genius? Who was an electrical engineer? Nobody. But we knew it worked because we saw people do it. And that's what we started doing. We started playing in the parks. And from that point, I started developing a little name, and I would go to clubs eventually and start going to the DJ who was playing that night, introduce myself. And if they heard me, I'd say, yo, can I rock that for a minute? They would, more times than not, they would let me rock it. And as I did that, the promoters that were giving these street parties and renting these clubs now, because they all got hip to what was going on, started to decide, well, let's rent a club like T Connection in the Bronx, which was the mecca from where my neighborhood is, Uptown, Northeast Bronx, T Connection. They would rent the Renaissance Ballroom, that was in Harlem. They would rent certain places, and then from the street DJs and MCs that had names, they would hire them. And as you met these promoters, you would tell them who you are, and if they heard of you, they might put you on. The more often you did that, the more you had a chance of playing somewhere, and that's what I did until eventually I started getting hired all the time, and that was it. First of all, I went to a music high school. I went to the High School of Music and Art. They call it Performing Arts now. Myself, Curtis Blow, Marcus Miller, world-famous studio bass player. A lot of artists. And if you ever do research on music and art at that high school, you'll see many musicians, actors, and actresses went there. So I already had the music background. My father was a jazz and R&B saxophone player. He played on a bunch of R&B hits in the 50s. When they heard me rhyming and rapping, they didn't understand what I was doing. And my father came in my room one day, and I was rhyming off a record, and he asked me, like, what are you doing? And I said, rhyming, rapping, MCing. And he was like, what is that? He said, why can't you sing? Because I could sing. I said, no, I don't want to sing. I'm saying these words off the beat. Dad, listen. And I hit it, and he didn't understand it. They thought it was crazy. And eventually they found out when I started getting paid and started running around, my name started being on flyers, and I got exposure, the validity of it. But in the beginning, they were like, stay in school, do your thing, get a degree, and get a real job. And whatever happens with that stuff later on is cool. But right now, you need to go to school. I left college after my second year of school because I was getting gigs. I was going to Philly. I was going to Massachusetts. I was going to Maryland. I was doing shows and getting money. And I was so engrossed with it, I had to give myself to it. Because everybody I knew that was doing it, Curtis Blow, Flash, they were all into it like it was their life. It became my life, so. But they didn't approve of it at first, you know what I'm saying? And Mom did, but she winked at me. But my pop was like, yo, I'm watching you, and you better not be doing drugs or nothing like that. You better be doing what you're doing. But I don't even like it. But I stuck with it, and it became what it became. In the very beginning, no one took this seriously as far as, let's say, the system, the industry. I was told before I even made my first record that hip-hop was a fad, and it would never last. And what's the point of even putting your voice on a record? Because if you put your voice on a record, people won't come to your shows anymore, which is the complete opposite of what the recording industry means. You make a record and you perform your record. It was so new that nobody figured that, well, if you make a record, who would come see you? Just buy the record. You don't need the artist. That's how crazy it was then. Then it was about convincing people to take us seriously. I had a record, and because I live in New York, the top and the number one station at that time was WBLS. Frankie Crocker, who was the program director, who's a legend in the music industry and recording industry, God bless his dead, he's dead now too. I made a commercial for him, and Mr. Magic, who was the first DJ to play rap music on the radio. Magic had moved to BLS, and I made a commercial talking about Frankie Crocker, Mr. Magic, and WBLS, just to introduce myself to the radio station and to get played. Because most likely, if he had played the commercial, he'd follow with the record. Now, the politics of the industry say, well, we have to deal with the label. They have to give us money. We got to make deals. Do you have an album coming? What's your next single? I knew none of that then. I just made the commercial. Went to the studio, made the commercial. I go to a show. Stacey Lattisaw, Jeffrey Osborne, New Edition. These are all acts from the 80s. And I meet Frankie Crocker. And I go, Frankie, my name is Kool Kyle. He stopped me right there. He goes, oh, you made that commercial for me. That shit is hot, boy. I like that a lot. I said, well, Frankie, can I get the record played? He said, have your label call me, but I don't think so, because WBLS does not play rap music. The Message hadn't even come out yet. That was the first record that got regular rotation play. Even Rapper's Delight did not get regular rotation. Eventually, it got that, but in the beginning, it didn't. The Message was the first rap record by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five that got serious rotation. And he told me, we don't mess with rap music. So we had to convince people that this was a valid entertainment entity. The streets were talking. The streets were valid. And whatever comes from the streets, if it's pure enough, we'll cross over. And eventually, look where it is now. You're interviewing me. It started from there. In the beginning, we couldn't even convince radio stations to play us. Before the media had its grasp of what hip-hop was, and before the industry welcomed it in and it became a money-making machine, just like anything else. When R&B and rock and roll in the 50s first came out, when Elvis first did what he did, imitating prominent R&B artists, it was a scandal. But someone realized these kids love this. Now let's see what it does. And they watched it, and they watched it grow. And when they realized it could become a money-making entity, that's when the industry grabbed it. In the beginning, they didn't want to touch hip-hop because hip-hop represented black, Latino, kids of color, urban youth. And the only thing they represented, because we all came from the South Bronx and Harlem, was trouble. And they didn't want to deal with that. They didn't want to have parties and have these kids together causing ruckus and tearing shit up, because that's a problem. But when they made the first rap record, which was, well, not really the first rap record, but the first acknowledged rap record, Rapper's Delight, and it sold off the charts, executives started realizing, you know what, this is another category of music now. And we don't care who buys it, somebody's going to buy it. And once they realize they can make money off it, now it becomes a little bit purified. It becomes a little bit watered down. It's kind of safe. But there was always the negative, ghetto, scared connotation surrounding rap music from where it came from, because it came from the streets. And the era that it came from was a very bad period in New York City. I grew up in the 70s, I know. And you didn't want to really mess with that. But it became something that could make money. And please don't get offended, but once white kids started embracing rap music, it became something to watch even more, because now, we're selling records now, and records mean money. It wasn't just rock and roll anymore. It wasn't R&B. It wasn't soul. It was hip-hop. When Run DMC crossed over, especially by the time they made Walk This Way, which was much later on than when I started, that sealed the deal. This is a legitimate entity that will always be here, and we're going to ride this horse or ride this train till the wheels fall off, and they're still riding because the wheels are still there. I've had a couple of highlights that made a difference in my life. My first experience with Hollywood mattered to me because as time goes on, people understand Hollywood's contribution to hip-hop music, club and dance all together. Hollywood is a legend, and he embraced me in the very beginning when I was a total nobody. As time goes by and you read his biography, he has a book out now, you understand how important Hollywood is to hip-hop music. That was my first standout thing. I made a movie back in 1980 with Deborah Harry, Fab Five Freddy, Lee Quinones, famous graffiti writer, starring Jean-Michel Basquiat. Basquiat is a street artist who was embraced by the avant-garde people from the village. Andy Warhol eventually adopted him. He became a world-famous street artist / painter who died after a couple of years, but his artwork right now is worth millions of dollars. The only filmed thing he ever did, there has been other movies about him, starring other people. Jeffrey Wright portrayed him in a movie with Christopher Walken about maybe 10 years ago. But the only film thing he ever did, I'm in that movie. Blondie gave me an instrumental version of Rapture, and I do my thing off her instrumental version. My man DJ Sinbad is playing. Fab Five Freddy walks in, Lee Quinones walks in, Deborah Harry walks in. I'm proud of that because that's the first filmed MC performance. This is before Wild Style. This is before Beat Street. This is before any of the movies featuring rappers. And I was the only rapper in that movie. Unfortunately, it didn't come out when we made it. It came out years later because of political problems and financial problems. But it was filmed in 1980. It's called Downtown 81. And I'm very proud of that. I can say I'm the first rapper, and especially solo rapper, to ever be in a movie. A guy got in contact with me from Columbus, Ohio, who grew up in Philadelphia. My first record did very well in Philadelphia back in the day. He told me, to make a long story short, he was 11 years old when my record came out. And he was so enamored with me, he started calling himself Kool Kyle. His mother had to tell him, stop calling yourself Kool Kyle. Your name is Joel. And he called himself Kool Kyle. And when he went to school, he said, my name is Kool Kyle. And he embraced my identity. Now, if this kid was 11 years old, then I had to be at least 21 or 22. You know, I was a grown man. And he loved that record. He quoted and remembered the radio station that played it, which was WDAS in Philadelphia. And he just went on and on about the difference I made in his life. He said that he would go to school, and just like from the Malcolm X movie, I don't know if you're familiar with that, at the end of the Malcolm X movie, you have close-up all the kids in the classroom, they go, I'm Malcolm X, I'm Malcolm X. He used to go, I'm Kool Kyle. And when he reached out to me and I responded back, he had choked up voice and tears in his eyes. His daughters hit me today on Facebook and told me what an impact my conversation made with their dad. He told his daughters, guess who called me today? And they were like, who, Beyonce? They said, no, Kool Kyle. He told me, I am his Michael Jackson in the hip-hop world. I've never heard anything like that in my life. It was very impressive. It was heartfelt, and I had to speak to him directly, and that really made my day, and I really appreciate what this young man told me. I'd like people to remember that when I put the mic in my hand and you stood there and watched me, you couldn't watch me for too long because you had to turn around and dance. You had to have a good time. And when you got home that night, you said to yourself, I had a good time. And that guy on the mic really made me have a good time. That's all there is to it. That's all it's ever been about. Understanding what I was trying to do and going home feeling good because I got on the mic and I made you throw your hands in the air. And I made the girls say, ow. And I made the homeboys go, ho. And they had a great time. That's what I'd like to be remembered for.